The MakerPipe T-connector allows you to connect two pieces of electrical conduit together in your DIY projects. Now, it's a really simple connection, but it actually has a surprising amount of versatility, and there's a lot of different ways that you can use it creatively in your projects. In this video, we're going to highlight a few builds from the community and showcase some really specific ways that you can use the T-connectors in your builds. With that said, let's jump into the first one, which is this beautiful deck sunshade that was shared a little while ago. And we can see really two main uses of the T-connector here, which is really cool, where basically it's just kind of its standard use where you have the piece of conduit that runs continuously through the top half of the connector, and then you have the piece of conduit coming in from the bottom that terminates in the bottom of the connector. If you're building with conduit and MakerPipe, you don't have to use a drill or use any electricity. You don't have to drill through the conduit because the connectors are made to clamp around the conduit, and you don't have to do any drilling or any welding, anything like that. So because of that, the piece of conduit needs to terminate inside of the connector before the nut and bolt there, so it doesn't interfere with them. And then this is pretty much just the basic standard use, and we can kind of see it here again being used in its standard way, where you have the piece of conduit coming in from the other side and terminating in the bottom there, and then this piece of conduit runs continuously through it, and it's just being used to create a pretty standard connection between two pieces of conduit. And here we can see another very standard use of the T-connector here in this bird feeder, where there's a piece of conduit coming in from the bottom that again terminates inside of the connector, and then this horizontal piece runs continuously from one side of the build to the other, and then it just runs continuously through that top half of the connector there. Pretty standard use here. But now we can start seeing some really unique uses for the T-connector. And the first one is one that might seem obvious, but a lot of people don't realize that you can use the T-connector to create an elbow. As we can see here, this builder used the T-connector to create these two-dimensional rectangles here that attach to the frame. And basically, all you have to do that is just the horizontal piece of conduit, or it could be vertical as well as it is in this, that's running continuously through the top half of the connector. Instead of running continuously through it, you just connect the clamp or the connector flush with the piece of conduit, so it stops flush there, and then you have the other piece that terminates inside of it and then goes through, goes out of the bottom of the connector there. So that's a really simple way that you can use the T-connector to achieve two-dimensional rectangles. And here we can see another version of this where the top half of the connector that again normally allows for a piece of conduit to run continuously through it, instead of that, it's just running and kind of stopping flush with the end of the connector. And then of course we've got the bottom piece that terminates inside of the clamp. Pretty standard use, but as you can see, allows you to make a simple connection and a simple elbow in your projects. And here we can see another creative use, which is basically the T-connector, kind of two T-connectors stacked on one another to achieve a 90-degree corner. We have the 90-degree connector, which allows you to join three pieces of conduit together to create three-way corner connections like this. But you might find that it's better to use two T-connectors stacked on one another for different reasons in your build. We'll look at a couple here in a moment, but this first one, they needed to be able to grab the wooden top and get their hand underneath it. So they wanted this piece of conduit to sit a little bit lower than the other one so they could get their hand underneath and pull the top off of the frame really easily. And this also allows the rails kind of going around to keep different things from sliding underneath the car seat because it's positioned a little bit lower than it would have been if they had the bar up with the 90-degree connector up here going all the way around. So that's one way that you might use the T-connector, stacking in that way. Another reason you might do that is we saw with Nancy a few weeks ago, we did an interview with her in her awesome garden. She used the T-connectors and stacked them just for the increased modularity that it has. So basically she made some really awesome garden boxes, and she was able to add on to them all the time because she just keeps inventory of T-connectors, and she can add bracing from side to side. As we can see here, she can completely add on to the structure by stacking another T-connector. And let's just say she's building off of this right side here. She can grab another T-connector up here and then branch off and add a whole new section, as she said she did recently, as she added on to her cantaloupe section of the garden. And using the T-connectors and stacking them allows her to kind of, add on at any point or add some bracing. If the cantaloupes are getting really heavy or any of her plants are getting really heavy, she can add bracing on. And she said she likes to do that instead of some of the more complicated connectors because it gives her increased modularity in her garden. And we can see another reason for stacking connectors, which is creating really unique angles, as we can see here in this walkway trellis. So the top half of the connector that allows the piece of conduit to run continuously through it is going up and then stopping. It's being used flush here, as we saw earlier with the 90, except this is being used to create kind of a really unique and creative triangle here. We don't know what this angle is, and you don't really need to know, because you can swivel that all the way around 360 degrees to get whatever angle you need. So you really don't have to be super precise, which is also helpful and handy whenever you're building on the fly. But by stacking the connectors in this way, they were able to achieve some angles and triangles that otherwise wouldn't be possible. And all they had to do was just, secure the T-connector in that angle that they wanted, and then achieve this really cool triangle and trellis. And we can see another example of that here, but this is really helpful for bracing. So we can see that the T-connector is attached to this bar here, and instead of kind of being flat continuously, or being completely flat, as we can see in this T-connector, to add this brace from front to back that's going to support the desktop. This is actually angled slightly, so there's a T connected here, and then this brace goes all the way down and connects to the lower portion of the frame down there, which is super handy and increases the strength of this frame. And it's really easy to do by just swiveling that to achieve that angle that you need for that brace. So a lot of different ways you can use the T-connector. I would argue that it's the most versatile connector in the system, because it's the most economical, and it allows you to do some really creative stuff. I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, leave a like and consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.